Kent Yoshimura, thank you for joining me.
I'm so happy to be here. I want to make sure you catch those waves later too, so we'll make this quick and fun.
Can you take us back to the early days of Neuro? What inspired you to start a functional gum and mint company? How did you go from the idea stage to an actual product?
It's crazy because I never really studied business, but I was always creative, I want to assume, in my mindset and how I wanted to approach things. So, as an athlete, I was training pretty heavily and competing in both judo and Muay Thai, traveling internationally, and then studying neuroscience at UC San Diego. And wanted to get better supplementation in general because supplements during that time, this is like, almost 15 years ago, it was in a realm of bad compliance. You didn't know who the players were, you didn't know where they were sourcing from. So I started delving into just getting powders where I knew the trusted sources with COAs, with the research behind it, and mixing them in my own room and using that for a lot of my training and my schoolwork. And then when my co-founder Ryan got in a really bad snowboarding accident that left him paralyzed from the waist down, it it became pretty obvious that these supplements that I was taking was benefiting him as well. And then on a scuba diving trip that we went on together, because that's one of the most accessible things that you could do, even as a paraplegic, we both had this idea where it was like, pills are great. Supplements are great, powders, all these things that are coming out. Like, it's great that there's more qualified assurance behind the supplements that we're taking, but making it accessible, similar to how scuba diving was accessible for Ryan, is something that's majorly missing in this ecosystem. And it dawned on us that gum and mints, which people take that have no functional benefits really whatsoever, was in need of innovation. And that idea just clicked. It was like, how do we make cognitive enhancements in gum and mint format that people could take at any time and keep in their pockets, and it benefits them in the same way that these supplements were benefiting us. And that was a decade ago now.
Wow. Well, it seems like a really spot on original insight that you had. Just from my personal experience, I happen to be a Neuro user myself. In the beginning, one of the reasons I wanted to try it is exactly as you said. I don't like taking pills. It feels like very medicine like. I'm like, I don't want to. It feels like it's just too hospitally, and I just don't want to. It feels like a prescription. And the gummies, they get stuck in my teeth, and it's just like not good for your teeth, I guess.
And filled with
So
sugar. It's
yeah,
like the thing you should be avoiding. So,
so I'm not a gum chewer either, but I like the mint idea, so I kind of wanted to try. And also, like I'm on a journey to unlock more creativity as a founder. Just I feel like within the age of AI, just coming up with creative ideas is just so important right now, and it's so hard. And I'm kind of trying to tap into that. So I'm like, let me try the creativity, the calm, and the clarity. So that was my first, and then I feel like this is something that I want to keep using. So in the beginning, I started getting the tins, but then I ran out of the tins really quickly. So I started getting the big
yeah.
bags, like the industrial size.
Yeah.
So that's what I have here in my. I already had like two today. Kind of like
It's
Mondays,
like,
I use a lot of
that's definitely one
Neuro.
of my favorites. Yeah. That's awesome to hear.
Like Mondays is because we like to start every week with like new experiments, like what are we testing, new things, new ideas. So I'm like Monday, I neuro up on Mondays, to come up with new ideas. But anyways, aside from my story, going back to your early days, so you came up with this idea. So I'd like to know how you went from, let's say, I'm someone who's interested in starting my own brand like Neuro, right? And I came up with this idea. I said, I don't want it to be a pill. I want it to be accessible, like the scuba diving example that you gave. And I happen to be a neuroscience student, which makes you like the perfect founder, I guess. or, or let's say, no, let's dumb it down. I'm not a neuroscience student. I know nothing about it, right? but I like this idea. I want to pursue it. What do I do? Which ingredients do I need to look at? How do I find out about these ingredients? How do I do the research? And how do I test it? How did you test it? I read that some dorm room stories or something like that in the early days.
Yeah.
How did that go?
I mean, I definitely don't think you need an academic education, although I am like a person of academia, so I trust the research, I trust the studies, and people that are day in, day out researching and experimenting with these things are reliable sources at the end of the day, right? As reliable as even any individual that, whether they're in academia or not, would be experimenting, researching, and like really filtering through, because there's a lot of fake information out there too. Speaking of AI, being able to filter through what's legitimate and what's not from a clinical studies perspective and looking at data. So that's really the angle that I think being a student of neuroscience has taught me, and what clinical studies, how clinical studies are conducted, have taught me. To be able to look at research in a data-driven and non-subjective, but rather objective way. With that being said, if you have an idea, let's say, and there is a novel ingredient that you are trying to put into some format, I think there's so many options now from sourcing. So how are you looking at getting the source? And what is like the brand? I'm going to jump forward just a little bit and then jump back. So as a company, over these years of developing products, there's core brand values that we wanted to embed into how we run this company. Some of them being accessibility, which is why it's in government format, accessible wellness, quality backed, how are we doing third-party testing on all of our ingredients and our final product with stability testing and all those things, so that we know that the final deliverable is in the best possible format plus ingredient profile possible. And then finally, are we science-backed? Does every single ingredient and thing we use have a level of data and research that we find reliable to be able to be put into a product? So now that I've said that, if you are someone that's starting something new, I think figuring out what those core values are of the thing you're trying to launch and then embedding them into every single process that you develop to create this product is incredibly important. If there's a novel ingredient that you find is good, what makes that novel to you? Why were you attracted to it? What is the criteria and the values that you want to put behind this product that you're putting out into the world to market out into the world, so it's different from any other product, and any other product qualification? And then from there, you can start getting the people, the financing, the operations, the money, all those things that are required to turn it into something much, much bigger. And so, that's the philosophical high-level answer. The operational answer is there's so many resources. You could go from places all the way to Alibaba, to Thomas.net, where you can find manufacturers near you, to even new services like Keychain that allow you to find and match up with suppliers, manufacturers, CDMOs, where with discussion, you could find a partner that fits your brand portfolio and profile and core values that you want to develop to create the thing that you feel proud about.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the practicality of it a little bit. Let's say I followed your philosophy, matched my values and the things that I want to do with the ingredients. Now I want to actually make the thing. Let's say I'm doing it in my kitchen or something. I figured out some kind of formulations. Like, how do I do it? How did you mix your own supplements in your own dorm room, like in the early days? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I think I just naturally had these like core values in my head, because I was like, okay, I want science-backed, I want qualified wellness, I want accessibility. And I found suppliers, whether it's through, there are some websites that are non-existent anymore, but there were so many suppliers back in the day where you could get raw powders that did spectral analysis on those ingredients. So I would purchase different ingredients, mix them up in a way that I could test it against myself, against the day before, day after I take it. Sometimes placebo. It was very rough, to be 100% honest, but um, I developed like a V0 of NeuroGum with the core ingredients in powder format in my dorm room, mixing it up. From there, with those ingredients, when we found out that we wanted gum and mints, we took those ingredients, and there's multiple ways to go about it. You can find a formulator, someone that has like a chemistry background.
How? Tell me about that. I ask everyone, how do you find formulators?
Yeah, so during that time, Thomas.net was the most valuable resource. And I think there's so many other resources now, including Keychain, but keychain.com, I think is the website. But Thomas.net or thomasnet.net, they have a weird website, is almost like a yellow pages for formulators, manufacturers, and suppliers that we basically went through like 20 different companies that would even take us with this idea that we presented to them after signing an NDA and said, hey, can you make something that is a usable profile, a usable format that we could launch into the market. From there, we found one that is still our partner to this day. They're incredible, that was able to create our first batch, and then from the formulation perspective, get it over to a CDMO who's able to press it into a gum and mint format. And then obviously you have to find packaging suppliers and things like that too. That's where supply chain gets complicated, but all that got packed together at a co-packer, and then we delivered our first shipment, which was to my apartment of all places. But I think you don't need a 3PL, you don't need any of these things, but all the pieces that are. If I'm showing my gum pack here, I don't have here. You need the core product and the ingredients in the core product. So how are you finding that with ingredient suppliers? Who's making the gum itself for you? The manufacturer itself. Who's packing it? The blister people. Usually the manufacturer already has a team of people that they work with or contractors that they work at. So they brought in their own contractors to put into this blister format. We found a paper manufacturer, and I designed the first packaging, but we found a paper manufacturer that would make this. And then the manufacturer packed it up, boxed it, and then got a shipper to send to my house. And
what was the minimum?
That was the first product. Oh man, I think it was 20,000. How much was it? It was quite a bit. It was like $20,000 at that time was the minimum order, but the minimum order quantity was a lot of kilograms. I would say it was a lot of gum.
Yeah. So I want our watchers, listeners to understand the kinds of money they have to save to get into games like this. A lot of entrepreneurs kind of like you, some others kind of put up their life savings into the original minimum order quantity to get even started, take a huge risk. And then, just last week I talked to a founder and she told me 20% of it was defective and things like that. And, just all these horror stories. One thing I like to do in this Brand Architects podcast is to communicate. Entrepreneurship is not all that romantic as people kind of make it out to be. It's very stressful, some of these things in the early days. So how much money did you have to put up in the early days to get the minimums?
Gosh, it was 20,000 that first time, which is money me and my co-founder saved up over just years and years. Because it's a lot. 20,000 is a lot of money when you're 27, And then prior to that, I was working at Sony. I was doing children's branding with Coffee and Tea Leaf. I was working in film. I was working a bunch of random jobs. But I will also say, though, the way we did it, we knew that was the minimum. And we ordered the product, but it's usually a deposit, and then you pay 30, 60, 90 days, if you're lucky, 90 days, after you receive the inventory. So the way we floated our cash was we put in a deposit. We still had a little bit of cash in our bank that we used for marketing because we launched on Indiegogo, which is a crowdfunding platform, was able to get the money from our crowdfunding to pay the rest of the PO purchase order 60 days later. So floating the capital is also a big thing to consider and think about. But that's risk, right? If like our crowdsourcing didn't go well, if we didn't make the sales initially, then now we're just like out of that money. And I just have 3 pallets of gum sitting in my apartment. So it's, I also do think we took a bigger risk by entering into a new category versus there's so many more manufacturers and suppliers that could, you know, like this is my buddy at Cheers, but, and they have a pretty novel product also, but their hydration powder is, they got their plastic tub, they got the packaging and wrap around it, and then it's just a free fill of powder. There's a lot more manufacturers that do this than make a gum and mint. So you got to just think about, you know, how do you want to enter into the market? And sometimes there's easier methods than others.
Yeah. Yeah, yours is a little bit like Blue Ocean because I don't really know other gums or mints that do this. Maybe there are, maybe I'm just ignorant about it, but I haven't seen that much.
Yeah, I mean, there's some players, but I mean, we're just significantly bigger than all of them. And you know, the difference is we approach it from a supplement perspective. They approach it from almost like an energy drink perspective. You know, if it's an energy gum, it'll be like, hey, let's put energy drink ingredients into a gum. And then the gum itself is kind of bad, you know, like the chew quality is weird, or it's a stick gum that uses heat, so the ingredients break down. Like for us, we have a patented way we make it. We cold compress it. The ingredients we get, like we have an equity partnership with like a formulator that like gives us the best ingredients. The way we set it up is a little bit different. But of course, that took years to do. So and we're 9 years into the business, so.
Yeah. Well, let me just give you a little bit more product feedback as well, you know, about the sleep one. So before I go to bed, I don't want to drink something, you know, like a sleep drink or sleep tea, because then I'm just going to wake up in the middle of the night. It interrupts my sleep. Yeah. I don't want to chew something either because I've brushed my teeth. So the ones that you have actually melts in your mouth. So like as I enter, I just like start, you know, sucking it while I'm reading in Kindle and falling asleep, you know, so that kind
zero
of
sugar. It's
zero
like,
sugar, right? Because I brush my teeth. I don't want to drink something. I don't want to chew something. I don't want to take a pill because that makes me feel like I'm just like a pill person. You know, it's just psychologically, it's just like, don't want to do pills.
And that's why we took so long to launch a sleep product, because we knew, we were like, that's what everyone thinks. Why are there sleep gummies? Like, you don't want gummies stuck in your teeth as you're sleeping. With sugar and all that stuff. And like you said, with the liquid, you don't want to be drinking liquids before you go to bed. You're going to wake up at 3 a.m, you know, if you do that. So for us, it was like, how do we make something that tastes good, is sugar-free, you know, obviously artificial flavor, artificial sweetener-free, and make it in a way that dissolves faster than anything else in the market. And, you know, it took us like several years, but we were finally able to launch it last year. I think it's one of our best products for sure.
I like it. I like it a lot. I don't actually take the energy one. I just take the calm and clarity and the sleep one. Energy one, I just like drink coffee in the morning. And then, so now we have our pallets at home. We've formulated. Now we have to sell, right? How did you go from now I have all this stuff to selling your first 100?
Man, you know, I think entrepreneurship takes a lot of luck. But then it's also like opportunity meeting luck, right? And I think when we first launched, we launched on Indiegogo. And during that time, I was already a part of a network of people really into nootropics, because those were the people that I was talking to. It was a Reddit subreddit, but those were the people I was talking to, consulting with. All of us were looking at research. All of us were mixing powders in our own room. And that community, which has turned into something different nowadays, but that community is who were the first people to adopt our product. And when we launched, I posted in there because I was like a pretty heavy poster in that subreddit, and we immediately hit our goal in 3 days. We sold $20,000 worth of product in 3 days.
You were known in that subreddit already as a character, not just somebody coming in trying to sell their stuff without knowing anybody in the community?
and it was very genuine and very authentic because like I wanted to create something that all these people I knew in that were similar consumers to myself create a product that they would chew, create a product that they would want. And, lo and behold, it was a product that they wanted. And in that process, it was pretty remarkable that like there's this concept of crossing the chasm, and we were able to get this consumer group early on. It's your core consumer. And then from there, we crossed the chasm into a much more wider audience because Dr. Oz, no matter what you think about him, hit us up. He heard about our product, hit us up, and wanted to do a showcase on our product and the rising trend of nootropics. So literally 3 months after we launched, all of a sudden, we're on Dr. Oz, and we got this massive like US appeal and sold out of inventory completely. My phone number, my cell phone number was the customer service phone number. So I was getting phone calls 24/7, products sold out. It was so crazy. But from there, constantly having these step changes and building and building and building. And it's, we are where we are now. And I do think though, like nothing is an overnight success. Like even then, like our revenue the first year I think was, like we still did pretty well, but our revenue the first year was, $750K or something. Like nothing to write home about, nothing that where we're like, we're going to quit our jobs and do this full time. But it was enough for us to be like, oh my God, this is a proof case, an MVP, where if we put the right people, the right marketing, and the right like brand values in place, it could turn into something real.
Wow, that's incredible. So the two lessons here that stuck out to me, one of them is just how important luck is really in entrepreneurship. Sure. I mean, I think I'm realizing more and more now. I've been an entrepreneur this is my second startup, the first one, 2013. So 11 years of entrepreneurship. And 11 years later, I'm thinking probably luck is even more important than skill, talent, everything else, in a lot of ways where, Second one is what you described about this Reddit situation is, if you want to do something 1 year from now, you may want to kind of think about what you're going to do 1 year before, in 1 year, and then start investing in that. So like the example that you gave, in 2020, let's say next year, 2025, October, if I want to launch something, let me figure out what the community for that is and start participating in it for 1 year so that I'm a known person, right? That's not luck, what you did there, right? That is truly authentic. This is a good example. If you want to launch a product and you need to hit up some journalists who write first build your relationships with them without asking for anything for like a year at least. Read their stuff, promote their stuff, help them with their career. And then if you want to ask something maybe a year later, it feels more authentic, but that's an investment, right? You don't do it when you need it. So that's kind of interesting.
People could sniff out when you're trying to sell them something, and it's so obvious, right? We see it every single day. But if you are genuine, and with this community, I was genuinely involved with it before even launching the product. And it was the people I was already very like in tune with how they were thinking. And I think that there's layers of communication that happen without necessarily needing to sell them on anything. So I think it's the same way with like, you as a surfer, right? Like if you were to launch a surf brand, it's probably a lot easier for you to launch a surf brand than say like, I don't know, like a stapler brand or something. I don't know how often you use staplers, but there's something authentic and something you care about that translates, I think, into the audience that you want to reach out to.
Yeah, it's interesting, but there are also characters known as serial entrepreneurs. They just like the game of business.
Sure.
I'm just going to start a watch marketplace or something because I heard watches are expensive. There could be a lot of money in it. Not that I have passion for watches. People do stuff
Definitely
like that.
Definitely true. And those serial entrepreneurs, though, like, what they still did was find a need in the marketplace and tapped into that need. So if there's like movement is the best example if you're using watches, but there was high-end watches and cheapo watches, and there was nothing that felt luxurious but right in between. And they just caught that market perfectly. They just tapped in and squeezed themselves in. So it's business is, it's an art. There's so much to it. And
Yeah.
I think that's why I love it so much.
Ken, there's a Shark Tank story here. Let's hear that too.
Yeah. What do you want to hear about it?
Well, you declined the offers there, right? But despite that, you've seen impressive growth. What happened there?
Yeah, I mean, Shark Tank called us when we first launched. We made a whole video. We didn't hear anything back from them. And then a few years later, we heard back, and Ryan and I went on the show, and I think we were doing about 3.5 million in revenue that time. It was like almost, I guess, like 5 years ago now. But we aired right before right before COVID. We went to Sony Studios, shot. Robert Herjavec and Kevin O'Leary both gave us a deal, but we decided to turn it down because one of the main things that they wanted was to decrease our valuation, and it didn't sit right with us. I think we valued ourselves in the right way. We already had investors that invested at that higher valuation mark, and it was an incredible experience, and the Sharks were all of them were incredibly nice, but it just felt like us devaluing ourselves on television sets a standard for how we operate our business, and we just had to say no. And that's just a value that I just wanted to stick to. With that being said, our episode aired right when COVID hit, which is crazy. The world shut down, and like actually everyone watched that episode because everyone was cooped up inside. And during that time, we became good friends with Daniel Lubetsky, who was one of the judges on Shark Tank, and ended up being a charitable partner with him for the Frontline Impact Initiative. He helped us out on a crazy lawsuit that we were going through with like a trademark lawsuit we were going through. And I made a video about this, but doors only close when you want to close them. Because that relationship, although Daniel said no on set, we still kindled it into something that we still talk to him to this day, and he's one of the nicest people that we know that's supported us in getting us to where we are. So, we're much, much bigger than what we were at Shark Tank. Like a year's worth of revenue that we were making then isn't even a month's worth of revenue now, I don't know if the Sharks feel like they missed out on an opportunity, but none of those doors are, I want to say to them, if they're watching, none of those doors are closed for them.
Well, sounds like they did miss out a big opportunity, but I think it was the right decision. You were already making $3.5 million, having raised money from VCs myself, devaluing your early believers on national TV. I mean, regardless of national TV, it's even worse on national TV. But
you open a Pandora's box.
It's just not a good thing to do.
Exactly, and it's just like it's the start to an end sometimes when you start doing that, So it's just, why would I treat these? Yes, they're sharks on national television, but why would I treat them any differently than any other VC, any other people that we would go to raise money? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. So Ken, let's talk about some of the things that are going on now. What's the new product that just released? Tell us about that, and what are how are you marketing it currently?
So memory and focus, I'm very excited for this product actually, and it's probably I chew it all day. But we had so many people that were like, oh, an energy product is great with the caffeine, but can we get something similar that's clinically backed, like similar to our energy and focus, but without the caffeine in it? And so over the last year, our product department went and worked through a bunch of ingredients and found Cereboost, which is this Panax ginseng, American Panax ginseng, that has clinical trials, tons of clinical trials that show that it improves working memory. So we were like, this is perfect. Let's put it in with some of our other core ingredients and launch memory and focus. which is a caffeine-free alternative to our energy and focus, but still provides the working memory benefits that our core product has. And we just launched that last Monday, but our launch partners that we have with it are pretty exciting. We were just at Steve Aoki, who's a internationally renowned DJ. We were at his house playing chess, chewing memory and focus, and doing a cool activation with him. Digital ads is obviously huge. We have like a fairly sizable email list, so obviously reaching out to our existing customers who are brand loyalists and providing them with product. We have a pretty big influencer outreach strategy, as well as we're like a top five. We hover between top three to like top seven, depending on inventory, product on TikTok and Amazon. So those are two massive channels for us. Amazon, we have 3 bestseller badges. So we use both of those ecosystems to get the word out there, as well as have a marketplace that everyone shops at, where we could use our brand name to bolster up our sales. So I would say awareness through influencers, similar to Steve Aoki. Platforms awareness with other types of influencers and affiliates on TikTok, digital media, and social channels, and then selling on our website, of course, through existing customers, but building this base and continuing to build this base on Amazon.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of influencers, obviously Steve Aoki is a huge name. Do you also work with up-and-coming creators? And if you are, and we actually do have a lot of listeners and watchers in that community, how do you select them, and what are some of the criteria that you're looking at when you're deciding to collab with creators?
So we're actually super selective with creators, because I talked about this from time to time, but a lot of people are like, oh, how did you do the TikTok success, or how do you do influencer marketing success? And for us, we don't mass reach out to people. I think there's this strategy with like a lot of agencies where it's like, we're going to reach out to 5,000 influencers and creators and give them this commission deal and see how they perform. For us, we have like 75 people we work with. We're super selective. We look at the data. We see how they represent themselves. We see the types of videos they make. And from there, we reach out to them and set up a deal structure with that person. That's like, it's not super unique because we do it across like different tiers, but it's unique in the sense where it's not just like shotgun blasting out to the world. And I think that level of care, and also for ourselves, like we use TikTok as a platform. I post every single day. Like we talked about the content videos I make. We have existed on this Amazon ecosystem, and we do like seminars and things like. We exist on these platforms where we're hyper focused into, and then I think it goes back to that authenticity and genuine knowledge base that you build when you reach out to either influencers, you use these platforms, whatever it is that you have to tap into. That, in my opinion, it could only happen with you actually getting in there, getting your hands dirty, and doing it. So I don't know if that answered the question, but the way we choose our creators is kind of like a internalized proprietary process of looking at data and reaching out to them in a very one-on-one basis.
Mm-hmm. Kent, final 2-part question. 2 problems giving you a headache right now, and 2 priorities that you have for the year that you're excited about.
Oh man, those are good questions. Well, one thing that's giving us a headache right now is capacity and supply chain. Um, when you're early on, I think growth is a big thing that people aim for, and balancing cash and all those things. Like, knock on wood, like we're positive EBITDA every month, so we don't really have a cash problem in that sense, but we do have a capacity and supply chain problem with how much demand planning and forecasting is getting more and more convoluted with the SKUs that we produce. Secondly, I think SKU rationalization in that regard. Like we have so much exciting stuff that we want to launch, but when we look at demand and we look at supply chain, we have to be careful in where we want to put our focus. And I think that's a lesson for all entrepreneurs because it's fun and exciting to do everything, but unless your core focus doesn't succeed, then like if you're not focusing on the things that matter, then you're not focusing on anything, and things start breaking down. So making sure that we retain our focus in the right way is like a big hurdle to definitely overcome. And then, not to be a pessimist, but one more thing, I do think retail is a beast that is. We're trying to continue to crack the code, and like we're doing better and better in retail. We just sold like our first 100+ units a week at Whole Foods downtown LA. So our velocities are getting better, but retail is so different from e-commerce and the level of control you have that it's a little bit of a learning curve for us that we're trying to figure out. But it's been a fun journey. Two opportunities. We are launching into convenience stores nationwide in Q1 next year, which is why I'm going to be at NACS over the next few days. Very, very excited for that. And then finally, our team is continuing to grow. We are just doing these cool partnerships. We're launching a co-development project with Steve Aoki, for example. We have some other awesome celebrities in the works with just like launching and creating, building new things. So it's almost like an impossible question to answer because there's too much. Every single day is it's tough, but there's too much joy for me to contain myself.
Kent Yoshimura, thank you for sharing your journey with me.
Thanks, Bora. That was great.